The time has come to get ready for the 2022 World Cup. And what better way to prepare than by revisiting the World Cup's most amazing goals? I'm Brian Phillips. I'm making a podcast about the history of the Men's World Cup, told through the stories of 22 iconic goals. The show's called 22 Goals. It's out now on the Ringer Podcast Network, and we're having so much fun.
This episode is brought to you by Anytime Fitness. We may talk a whole lot about sports, but when it comes to keeping fit ourselves, there's definitely room for improvement. I hit this point early July. I was just like, I am not in good enough shape. I started trying to walk at least 15,000 steps a day, or hiking, or just anything to keep my legs moving. Now it's the end of 2023. I feel great. I had a physical 3 weeks ago, and the guy was like, "You're doing great. You're doing better than you were 3 years ago." I felt great. Whatever your goals are, progress is possible thanks to Anytime Fitness. Get a personalized plan and support from an expert coach anytime, anywhere. Visit anytimefitness.com to try Anytime Fitness for free. Start to train for your life. Terms, conditions, and restrictions apply. See website for details. This episode is brought to you by Read, Write, Own, Building the Next Era of the Internet, a new book from entrepreneur and startup investor Chris Dixon. If you're listening to this podcast, you know what it's like to be part of a community of fans. You value the people who play, perform, and create for everyone. Well, what if there are more ways to support them, more ways to be a fan? And what if you had even more ways to connect with the teams, artists, and other creators that you love? Even though creators make the internet valuable, how much value do they get for their work? Well, that's mostly up to a few big tech companies. Shouldn't creators get more from the platforms they make successful? More value, but also more say, more control, more ownership? Read, Write, Own explores an alternative future for the internet, one that reclaims control for creators, fans, listeners, and gamers, the people who not only use the internet, but make it useful. Read, Write, Own imagines an internet built by us for us. So order your copy of the book today or learn more at readwriteown.com.
I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk now.
Hello and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am an editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me on the other line, he now knows how he'll plan his funeral. It's Andy Greenwald!
Pure class. In the Ferrixian tradition, pure class.
Andy, a special episode of The Watch. We will be joined again for the third time. The Return of the Jedi, Tony Gilroy, will come through and talk to us about the finale for Andor going forward from this very second. Will be full spoilers for the last episode of Andor of the season and the full season itself. It's so great to talk to you.
Including that I won't be on that interview. I've been written out of the canon.
You have not. You can just jump on. You can call in from a payphone if you want to, and I would have you. Okay. You know, there's no limit on what we would do. No, we have Thanksgiving travel going on, obviously, and Tony was nice enough to make some time for us again. And it's just been a great experience to have his insight into the making of the show and to the incredible work that he did on it. So, Andy, we've got the entire full season. I'll start with a softball. What'd you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, I thought it was amazing, and I have to confess something. This is a holiday season. You know, I'm going to be as tender as a sous vide turkey breast when I say we've been doing this pod for a while, and we have really loved a lot of big ticket franchise IP stuff.
Yeah,
we've been very critical of a lot of it. We've also shared the microphones and the cameras with people like our good friend Mallory, who have wept in front of us because of the beauty of certain scenes or certain characters on Game of Thrones or what have you. And I adore Mallory. She's a good friend and a brilliant thinker, writer, and editor and host. But in those moments, I haven't connected with her because I never felt that way about Game of Thrones. That's not a surprise to anyone. I choked up twice in this finale from characters that I met 10 weeks ago. And I don't know what else to say other than that. Like when Cassian is reconnected with his buddy, whose name I still don't know, but he looks great in that funereal Ferrix red, and he delivers Marva's deathbed message to him. And it ends by saying that she said, I love you more than anything you could ever do. It got real dusty.
Yeah.
It got real dusty. It's beautiful writing. It's beautiful emotion. It's beautiful character building and storytelling and world building. And it's what all this is for. And I can't believe it's in a Star Wars show. And I would just like to say to Mallory, I get it now. And happy Thanksgiving, because this landed something so beautiful to me and something that I didn't even know I was missing in my life.
I think I would have been totally fine going through life really enjoying this stuff.
Yeah.
But never having to get bowled over by it. Like, I think that there's a little bit of like holding things at an arm's distance that comes with watching tons of TV and movies every year and kind of seeing some of the same tricks get played out over and over again. And also like a kind of deep understanding, like maybe this was made for a kid who's 13, you know, or a kid who's 18, or somebody who has a deeper relationship with the mythology or the lore or the original source texts that you're watching. And I think that this was just the perfect marriage of material and writer, you know, and perhaps because it was something where they just let the writer rock, you know, and even the stuff that is connective tissue to larger IP. So for instance, the thing that fucked me up was the last scene was Cassian going to Luthen and saying, "Kill me or take me in," which is just an incredible line. But the thing is that we know that this does not work out for him, you know, like, and that this sort of gesture towards needing to belong to something, whether it's like a surrogate family or a revolution or whatever, by the time we meet this guy in Rogue One, it's not going great. He's pretty disillusioned with all of it, you know? And I think the fact that Tony can work forwards and backwards and side to side, and he can use the whole field in that way, is sort of what gives it those layers. And that's the promise of all this stuff, is that down the line, you can have something where if you are doing a prequel, or if you are doing a side story, or if you are doing a sequel, that the cumulative experience that people have with these characters and with these stories winds up making an even bigger impact when you have a moment like that. And I rarely feel that. Like even in flashback scenes in just normal television shows, I'm never like, oh, so that's what it was like with his dad, and that's why he doesn't trust people, you know, like, but there was something like heartbreaking about this guy who's like, okay, like I was an orphan. This is the only person who's ever really loved me. She's gone. And I now know that what she wanted more than anything in the world was to change the world. And so now I am willing to say, if you don't want me to be a part of that, then you might as well kill me, because my life won't have any meaning other than that. But even in the intervening years between when season 1 of Andor ends and Rogue One begins, and this guy is a bleary-eyed hitman, essentially, like think about what's going to happen in season 2. It just gets so exciting to even consider like the idealism that like he loses over the course of this story and regains by his sacrifice in Rogue One to make everything that happens in Star Wars going forward possible.
There's two kinds of inevitability in storytelling. There's inevitability that feels like the period at the end of a sentence, and there's inevitability that feels like an exclamation point. And there was a moment earlier in the episode where the kid, the son of the mechanic, who we last saw with Dr. Horst or Gorst, or whatever his name is, and he's looking at a hologram of his dad, and he's building what we correctly assume to be a bomb. And I'm struck by the weight of that moment with this, you know, not even a tertiary character being like, this kid is going to screw up, quote unquote, that's me saying that, his life, because of what they did to his father, and the cycle of violence will perpetuate, and it's never going to be free. And it's just this burden of it. It's inevitable that the son would behave this way, right? But it is deeply meaningful and impactful because of the way the story is told. And as someone who has been on this podcast many times and railed against the boundaries that are placed around stories that are prequels, the way that it stomps on stakes and stomps on our investment and our hopes and our ability to see forward or for there to be questions, this was a masterclass in showing what else is possible within those confines. Now, Better Call Saul did this as well. And it's a testament to this show again that we're talking about it alongside one of the great dramas of the last few years that was burdened with some continuity, but not like Star Wars.
Yeah.
But that sense, right, that there's so much pathos now and emotion and story within Cassian Andor's last years on not Earth, on many, many planets and across the galaxy, that's amazing. And it's amazing writing to be like, there's so much to mine here, and there's so much to show you what can be done with life, however many years a fictional character has in it. It's the opposite of a lot of the IP stuff we've seen, which is why I always find a hard time. I find it hard to praise the show and just stay within the show, because I feel very moved and inspired by what it means for all of the other shows that are being made and that are getting lumped into the same pot.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you've touched on that a couple of times, where it's both intimidating and inspirational. It's intimidating to think of like doing anything and like doing it at the level that Tony does it at, and that his collaborators do it at. But it's also inspirational because it's like, if you take the thing that you're doing incredibly seriously and have obviously the budget, but enough creative leeway to really do it your way, like that there can be just these transcendent results. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the overall arc of the story from this season, because one of the things that I think, obviously it was like an intergalactic espionage story, and it was told in the way it was told. So we were pretty in the bag for it. But one of the things I think that you and I reacted to initially was the structure of the season with these 3 episode arcs, and this feeling like Cassian was always going forward. So that if Cassian was our sort of POV character, we were moving through the galaxy, and we couldn't double back, and we couldn't make sentimental attachments, because this guy I needed to always be moving. He was a shark. He needed to go from Aldhani, and he went to prison, and then whatever was next. And as it became apparent that they were going back to Ferrix, and that all the loose ends were going to be tied up, and then especially in the finale, that essentially every major character, with the exception of Mon Mothma, was going to come to Ferrix to do what exactly? Like, I think you could make the argument that if you would ding the show at all, and I wouldn't, but if you wanted to, you could be like, this was an interesting battle royale of characters to all show up at this woman's funeral at the same time. And for me, it really hit hard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that the sentimental attachment that I built up, and I think also it was an incredible event for all these different people to witness in different ways, you know, and it's obviously going to, I imagine, make Dedra even more sure of herself. For instance, I think it's going to, you know, be interesting to see what happens to the people who leave Ferrix that Cassian puts on the spaceship. But what did you think of the circular rather than like arrow, like making it a circle rather than an arrow that never doubles back?
Oh, I just thought it was very elegant. And I think in my head a lot now when watching the show, I think about the way Tony talks about story, which frankly is also the way like pipe fitters talk about pipes, which isn't to say that he is not an artist who can be deeply moved by things. But, you know, he has such clarity of thought and structure, where a lot of people who write things, and I include myself in this, get kind of lost in the sauce about what we're doing and what's different and what it means and where the emotion is. And he seems able through obvious talent, but also I believe through the repetition of a craft, just see it almost he sees the simplicity in it, you know? So you remember when I asked him, like, oh, you know, it was interesting to see it all circle back, because we thought that he was a arrow shot out, or, you know, a cannonball shot out of a cannon into the larger galaxy and into a larger story. And he was basically, and I believe I'm paraphrasing here, he was like, no duh. You know, like it was the dumbest possible suggestion that it wouldn't, because that's what stories do. So to make it all come all the way back home, to make it be about his mother, about his personal relationship, the person who found him, and then he'd be lost without her, and then she would push him forward again. It's just elegant and it makes sense. It also allowed the show to do something that is still so powerful, profound, and unique in IP storytelling, which is, oh, Ferrix is a place. Ferrix is a place with a very specific culture.
Yeah.
And the anvil is hit at certain times, and there's music, and there's instruments, and there's colors, and there's ceremony, and there's culture, and there's history, and there's resentment, you know, and it's all in, I mean, again, you have Fiona Shaw posthumously, her character, delivering a Shakespearean monologue, like you know, Henry V's St. Swithin's Day speech.
Yeah.
That's wild in and of itself, but it's rooted not in the abstract idea of, well, our hero better become a hero soon because we're at episode 12. It's rooted in the idea of what authority and empire and fascism does to a place, which is not a radical idea in terms of history books, but is a pretty radical idea in terms of IP storytelling. So yeah, like and this is also I'll use the same language we often use when we talk about like crime novels and mysteries we like was there, if you had paused it at minute 22 and said, okay, pop quiz, who's converging here and what are their individual reasons for doing it, I would have been like, please get out of the way and let me press play again.
Yeah, right.
I don't care.
And there's no Monday morning quarterbacking going on. I think that you also hit on something there that is one of the great achievements of this show, which is the subtle things it says about living under, a fascistic or autocratic rule, which is 6 episodes when we watched the end of the Aldani arc. And it was like these 17 people left over who were coming to do this very precious, unique ritual and celebration of their own culture. And it's kind of like, just let these idiots do this. And then also like next year will be none at all or whatever. Like they'll just, that's the end point of what they're trying to start doing with Ferrix. So all of the eye rolling that they do about they make her into a brick and they do this and it's the daughters of Ferrix and all this stuff and grinding them down with like, well, they're gonna ask for this and we're gonna give them that and they'll be happy with that because we budged a little bit. Like all this bureaucratic nickel and diming that they do and the way in which they're trying to flatten the individual sort of traditions of every single place that they go, the empire I'm talking about, is kind of like a bigger deal to me than whether or not Cyril shows back up on the planet.
Yeah.
Conveniently right at the same time as Dedra and that whole thing. Like the total achievement of the season outpaces anything where you're like, oh yeah, of course. Like he's the one standing next to her to save her. This whole show is about these weird little moments that transform these people. Marva wasn't starting out the season being like, what I have to do is become a ghost revolutionary. Like it's not like that.
It also, though, every moment of Cyril on screen leads to this. Mm-hmm. There was thought there. I mean, he is obsessive. He was not going to let this go. He needed to be there if there was a chance that Andor would be there also. Like, and once he saw Dedra, his eyes are only on her. I mean, that tracks. We've seen that. So it's not far-fetched when it's resolved. It's maybe unclear in the offing or in the, in the build-up. But I don't think anyone watching this is bumping on where it landed, which is key to storytelling like this. I would also just say again, and I know we're kind of broken records on this, but I can't get over it. There has always been magic in the Star Wars universe. It's not called magic. It's called the Force. But like that is one of, if not the biggest brick in the wall that has allowed this franchise to thrive and grow and be beloved for 40 years. In our experience with it, there is always the open-ended question in any circumstance, in any movie or in the last few years of shows, that someone could show up and lift something with their mind. Whether it's Grogu on The Mandalorian or whether it's Luke himself showing up or Rey or Kylo or whatever else the gang was up to in those sequel movies. This is a show that made such an important counterbalance to that. There is no magic in the traditional Star Wars sense of magic, but there is life and there is color and there is music and there's poetry and there's Nemec's manifesto and there's writing and there's different ways to be inspired as living creatures, not necessarily all humans, in this galaxy, which does this remarkable job of making people like us care about it more. But I think it also makes the magic, when the magic comes back inevitably, mean something more. Because it's a richer place. It's not just one thing until the farm boy with a laser sword shows up. It's just not. And, my head's still spinning from it because I'm not saying not all franchises are the same. Like there isn't necessarily, although I kind of wish there was, the Marvel show that's just about, I can't even say Jessica Jones because there was that show and she had superpowers, even though it was about her relationship to it. Like there was briefly a Marvel series about the newspaper, the Daily Bugle, right? And
okay.
And so is that show in development? Probably, but that's not the same, right? Because it's Earth. It's Earth with Sokovia. Well, no longer. Briefly, it had Sokovia. But this is the fully fleshing out, or like taking a coloring book and finally coloring in all the other pages. And it's such an achievement. And I don't know, tying into the things we said on Monday, I hope Bob Iger sees it for what it is. I know that there's going to be internal debate and postmortems and whatever about the ratings and about the expense of this show versus other things and the return on investment. But I just love it for what it is. And it doesn't matter beyond that. But I just continue to believe that this is an important seed because of the things that are exemplified by this episode. And by the way, guess what? We get 12 more. And it's a no doubter, right? Like This was a story that's halfway done, and I loved it. I loved it for that too. There wasn't like well, it could end here. No, we're not done.
There's that element too of there's human behavior versus character behavior. And I think the writer needs to know that the writer needs to know that the character might not know why they are doing something, or might be open to there being multiple reasons for doing something. The reason why I'm bringing this up is not only like, why is Cyril on the planet? You know, like, isn't he risking something and probably great expense by stealing from his mother to go there? But even Luthen being there. And when Luthen is there and he's sort of like entertaining, Vel is like, we got to kill this guy, you know, like, or, you know, what are you going to do about this guy? And he's just like, we just take out the hotel as soon as he goes into the hotel. But I don't think that that's entirely true. I think he's also watching. He's watching as a spectator to see like, how good is this dude? You know, is this dude on the level of, I can defy the greatest odds here, where I'm taking on an entire garrison single-handedly to, you know, emotionally get closure with my mother, but also to escape the clutches of the Empire.
But also, it's always a bigger story. So what's playing on Skarsgård's face is that it's not theoretical anymore. It's not the stuff of manifestos and moving money around and backroom blather. It's not. It's people are throwing their bodies at laser guns. Like, that's what they're doing now. And he sees it.
A kid threw like a bomb, you know, like that's the start.
This is real now. And that plays on his face too. And I think it's a testament to the actor and also the way the show is edited, that we get some of that. There's some ambiguity in it, right? It's a little bit scary in that moment. And we should shout out, I think it's Benjamin Caron who directed the episode, right?
Yeah,
he had not directed on the show previously.
Oh no, I think he did one a little bit earlier. Right?
Okay, good. I wasn't sure, but regardless, I can't imagine a harder episode to track this many POV characters into a physical space and keep us oriented and navigate us through it. I mean, it's a testament to the direction, the editing, all of it. It's just such a well-made show.
The procession is such a great dramatic metronome for the episode too. Like, that second half of the episode essentially being this funeral happening and this slow build, and to have all that music and to sort of give everybody a reason to follow along with it, I thought was just brilliant. But he staged it very, very well. My only other question that I wanted to ask, and it's pretty small stakes, I think, compared to everything, but I think we'll probably have some bearing going into the next season, is what do you make of like Cyril and Dedra's exchange? You know, obviously he saves her from physical danger and she's just like, I guess I should say thank you. I don't necessarily think that it's a romantic relationship, but I wonder whether or not it's like two souls recognizing their counterpart kind of thing, where it's like, you and I both believe that we will go to whatever extent we need to like protect the rule here. Like,
yes, but it also does play on an emotional level, which is why I think a lot of people are shipping it, or at least even jokingly shipping it, you know, with some Twitter montages set to Taylor Swift songs. They're the two hungriest people on the show. They're absolutely ravenous. And in that moment, they see that in each other. You know, I think that Cyril saw that already, but she now sees it in him. And she's also, like Luthen, disheveled from it being real. It's not playtime anymore. She's not just, you know, in her all white office with her beautifully tailored outfit with the two pens that never get used. Like, it's real now. She almost died. And so she's not just a speculative chess player. She's a warrior also. And they see that in each other. And it's great. I mean, it's just wonderful character work to take them on the journey they went on this season, leaving you in a place where you can't wait to see where there is still yet to go. And the fact that they will now be united in that makes a lot of sense. And there's still a lot of stuff that hasn't been united. I mean, the Mon Mothma storyline, we moved from the drawing room to the car today, which was exciting. And then back to the drawing room.
I assume that she was essentially using her husband as a human shield for knowing that she's being listened to. So she's going to like throw out like, oh, it's his gambling debts. That's the problem.
And again, like the benefit of getting the chance to talk to Tony a few times, then it informs our viewing. And so we keep referencing it, but it was an amazing reference when he was like getting on set with Genevieve O'Reilly, was realizing that we had a Stradivarius in the orchestra. She plays all of it.
Yeah.
She plays all of it, even just in the wordless moment when she, you know, undoes her gown and reveals her neck. And then, you know, she's vulnerable and she knows what she's doing to her husband. And we know the history between them. But at some point, when they were 15 or maybe when they were 20 or whenever in their relationship, she did love him a little bit. And she knows what she's doing.
I really feel like there was a missed opportunity for Ringer crossover there, because it would be amazing if he was like, the reason why I'm broke is because I keep listening to Bill on $1 Million Picks. And then
losing.
And showing, and then he showed her the FanDuel account where he's just like, look.
Can you imagine the ad read?
He told me to bet the Giants.
The ad read you guys would have to do if you had to do the gambling support line for Chandralar and Andor and, Narkina 5 or whatever. I mean, it would be
the Croatia planet that Cassian goes to, there's no restrictions, baby.
It is free and clear there. Free and clear. Chris?
Yeah,
we're only a week or two away from doing our year-end pod. Mm-hmm. This is going to be high on your list, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm having a by myself conversation about it at 1.
I am too, because for all the reasons, and we'll talk about this in depth when we reveal our list and we do the podcast and we'll give it more thought. But like, to be number 1, it is still, in a way, we're still blog boys. Like, there has to be an argument that is bigger than the show itself, because especially this year, there are at least, I think, by my back of the notepad, there's like at least 5 shows that I could plausibly put at number 1 and feel okay about it.
Yeah. This
just made me feel stuff and feel excited in a way that other shows have not done, which isn't because a lot of that has to do with the degree of difficulty and in the world that it existed and reignited and just enlivened and opened up. It's what an achievement, and it's just pretty thrilling that there's more. I can't get over that fact.
There are episodes of television. I'm thinking specifically of some episodes of Barry that I saw where I was like, this feeling that I am having seeing this happen.
Yes,
this is the best show this year, even though maybe I don't know if this season is. And then there are shows that perhaps came to a conclusion or were in their, like in the case of We Own the City or The Bear, their first or last season, albeit, but like, the We Own the City being a limited series, The Bear being in its first season, where I was like, this is such a breath of fresh air and such an exciting new way of thinking that I'm tempted to make this my show of the year. And then there's something like Andor, where it was like a sustained, nearly, like a 3-month experience almost of greatness, and this is why I think I like doing this podcast so much, is when we have a show like this, when we have a Succession, when we have a Mayor of Easttown, when we have a show that feels like it doesn't really, like I'd love to believe in the monoculture still. I don't, but like it can be just you and me are like, hey, for 12 weeks, let's talk about this. And your week starts to be the time before I watch the new episode of Andor and the time after. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of the best feeling. There's a lot of things TV does wrong now, and there's a lot of ways in which it's delivered that are kind of annoying, but this is kind of like what I love.
I agree. And I also just can't stress this enough. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I keep doing small sample size theater, but like Chris and I, we do live out here in this quote unquote, this town. And we talk to people who write for TV and write for movies. And there is a refrain among people who are watching the show, which is, he's better at this. He's the best at this. It's just unprecedented, and we're all learning from it. And that's not just us saying that, that's other people who make shows that you guys love. And it's humbling and dazzling and crazy. It's crazy masterclass that to just roll into a different medium and show off. I clearly, this whole podcast today is just an advertisement for the Bill Simmons podcast, which I think is a struggling little show that the Ringer's thrown together, and it needs to boost its numbers. But like listening to it, we're recording this on Monday. Bill and Sal started just by being like, okay, well, Mahomes is the best. He's the best. Like there was some debate. Maybe it was someone else for a while. We thought it was going to be Josh Allen this year, but it's really not even close. And that's the way I feel about the writing behind the show. It's just, yep. There are moments that hit differently or surprise you more, or are trying to do something different, funnier, whatever. But it's like, dude, just study this. Honestly, I am. It's unreal. It's unreal. Well,
let's get into our third chat with Tony Gilroy. As
Your
we were
third
recording
chat,
with this
I'm
on
so
Monday,
jealous.
I still think that there's a chance that you might call in.
Really?
Yeah.
Will you guys call me? If we come back from break, if we say throw to the interview and I'm not there, will you ask Tony one thing for me?
Leave your outgoing voicemail message.
Will you ask him if he'll direct my pilot? Because I know he said no 4 years ago, but I feel like we've softened him up.
There's got to be something in it for us, right?
Always. I finally revealed it. The mask off.
Thanks to Kai McMullen for producing. That's thanks to Andy Greenwald for for being my buddy and for doing this pod. And we will be back after Thanksgiving. Everybody have a safe one, have a healthy one, have a happy one. Say hi to your mom for us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Enjoy the mashed potatoes, Baranskis.
This episode is brought to you by Mint Mobile. New Year's resolutions are fun the first couple of weeks. Then you kind of maybe conveniently forget about them halfway through January. No shame. It happens to us all. But this year I have a foolproof plan, at least when it comes to saving money. Just switch to Mint Mobile and you're done. Goal accomplished, because for a limited time, their wireless plans are $15 a month when you buy a 3-month plan. The great thing about Mint Mobile is there's no jaw-dropping monthly bills or unexpected overages, and all plans come with unlimited talk and text. Get this new customer offer today at mintmobile.com/watch. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You might say all kinds of stuff when things go wrong, but these are the words you really need to remember. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. They've got options to fit your unique insurance needs, meaning you can talk to your agent to choose the coverage you need. Have coverage options to protect the things you value most. File a claim right on the State Farm mobile app, and even reach a real person when you need to talk to someone. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
You don't have to buy custom window treatments in person, because Blinds.com invented a better way. Blinds.com is 100% online. There's no showroom markups or waiting hours for quotes from pushy salespeople. A Blinds.com designer helped me pick the perfect style for free. And Blinds.com shipped free samples right to my door. You can DIY or book a pro like I did with just one click. Best of all, everything's covered with the Blinds.com 100% satisfaction guarantee.
Shop Blinds.com for up to 45% off. Rules and restrictions may apply.
It's hard not to add a side of hot, crispy hash browns to your favorite McDonald's breakfast. It's even harder not to eat said hash browns before you get home. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Tony, thank you so much for joining us again. This is the conclusion of our trilogy. I wanted to start by asking about like sort of the superstructure of the season, because I was really struck by the fact that you had sort of paced out the first part of this, maybe 2/3 of the season, with these sort of going further and further out. Cassian's going to Aldhani. Cassian gets imprisoned. And it almost has like this moment where you're like, is each block of these episodes going to be him going sort of further and further out and getting changed by each experience he's having? And I guess the danger there would be like it becomes Gunsmoke, and every couple of episodes he has like a different kind of experience. But then you bring him home and you bring him back to Ferrix. And I was very struck by how emotionally resonant that was for me as a viewer. But I wonder for you as a writer, did you need him to kind of go back to where he came from to give this season an almost emotional color that it wouldn't have had if he had just kept on the run?
Yeah, it's really good grammar. You know, it's sort of probably in the beginning, it's a little bit aspirational, and you're kind of going, can I do this? You don't want to be, you're kind of balancing while you're in all those early stages. We talked before. Everything for me is like sketching, so I end up just sketching and sketching and sketching all over the place. So God, you'd love to get back there. You don't want to warp the story to do it, but as it certainly looks like it becomes a possibility, not only does it become a possibility, but then, there's pressure from production. If we're going to build a set that's this big and this expensive, we have to use it as much as possible. So please tell us we can have as many episodes there as possible. So that's, it's kind of going like, well, and, Cassian's a hard guy. And Diego's very, a lot of discussion beforehand about how, to be brave and hold it and don't be perfect. So if there's anything cool about him along the way, if I'm keeping him cool and keeping him slightly obscure or slightly less engaging, Ferrix is warm, and Ferrix is going through the exact same thing that he's going through. And when he ends up back there, you get to see, Ferrix pull together, literally, physically, emotionally, in every other way, and it kind of warms him up, and it's dramatically correct. It's grammatically correct, and it's happy for production. So it's just, I think when you're writing, you're always looking for that gravitational. You're looking for the black hole that's going to pull you into something natural. And so it's it's just that convergence of things. Then you have to get everybody there, and then it becomes another. It's harder to get everybody else there. That's the problem.
So how do you get everybody else there? You start thinking about, all these reasons why Dedra needs to be there, why Luthen needs to be there, why Vel needs to be there.
Yeah, and I had like, what's really like, because I know you guys go really deep and it's kind of inside baseball, but like, what's fancy? Getting Cyril there is kind of fancy. I have Alex Ferns that everyone wants to see Sergeant Mosk come back.
Yeah,
I do. And so I got, if he makes a call and he calls the apartment and this connection isn't good and sketch that and Edie's there. And that seems really, it was really goofball on the page and very helpful. And it certainly obscured the fact that I'm disguising something mechanical there. And then when Ben shot it and with the plan for, because we also didn't have any money for that, we're like, oh man, we don't just do it on a screen and make the smelter off camera. And we kind of had the idea, but oh my God, when they showed me what they had done, it's just so funny and it's so satisfying and you want to see it. Nobody would ever think twice to be like, wow, that's just the writer trying to get this guy to go someplace. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that,
I probably shouldn't even say that because it shows, it shows Santa at Walmart.
No. But I like being inside the workshop, though. That's the whole point of this podcast is to kind of understand.
That is fancy, advanced, screenwriting. And, people, the Bourne movies. Oh, how do you, what's the hardest thing? The hardest thing in the Bourne movies, absolutely, bar none. The hardest thing is to get people to have scenes together.
Yeah. Right.
You're running and hiding and I don't want to be with you. And I'm doing, how do you get a scene between people and can't go on the phone, so, and how does somebody even know that somebody's in a place to even have a scene together? How information flows is the root canal of writing Bourne. And so this was a little bit of probably pulling a little bit out of the old toolkit there, but that's a really good one. I mean, I don't think anybody until I said it, you would never have thought that, right?
Right. No, I wouldn't. I mean, and also it's like, I think that's something that TV struggles with sometimes. I mean, for instance, I watch Yellowstone and it's like, there's a character on Yellowstone who hasn't talked to his brother in a room in like 3 seasons and you don't really know why. And maybe it's scheduling or maybe it's whatever, but you realize how hard it would be because this guy is not on an everyday basis in the same office as the other guy. And it's really hard to draw characters together. You have to have a galvanizing event. And that's what you get with Marva's funeral.
Yeah. I mean, and how information flows and who knows what, and you can't have, the worst tell in anything is that is where, the IQ of the characters or their knowledge base or their attitude about something changes from scene to scene to help the writer out. Then you kind of, if you read a script like that, you go, wow, this is nowhere. That's a tell for me. But that's a fancy, that's a fancy little bit of business. And I'm doing a lot of old tricks in there to get everybody there. But yeah.
Well, the other thing that I really loved was the way in which the funeral becomes this stage and you get to see the characters in different ways. So Cassian goes back. And there's a degree of sentimentality to his return. I mean, there's also just a personal responsibility that he feels, but that's contrasted with Luthen, who has just spent the last couple of episodes being like, I would sacrifice 50 people for one man. Like the whole calculus of this rebellion is going to need to be sacrifice and a lack of sentimentality. And he gives that whole amazing speech about like, I'll never see the sunset on this world. So when you have Cassian and Luthen, are they supposed to be maybe 2 poles of an approach to a revolution?
If they are, then it's like, then it's a term paper. It's not what I'm thinking about.
Right.
They're just bringing there with everything they have. I mean, I want to have Cassian completely out of gas and have been through everything and realize that if he doesn't resolve this one way or other, he's going to have to keep running. I think he's legitimately telling the truth in the end of that scene. Like literally put me out of my misery or put me to use. I don't want to, my mother's dead, my place is gone. Everything, I saved the people I could save. I'm done. I'm tired. But no, I don't think about it the way you said it before because I'm happy if that shows up. I'm always, like you said before, I'm happy that like I'm real, and this was not in my mind doing it, but you're happy. I'm really happy. Someone said, why is he hiding up there? And he's watching. And I'm going, you know what? He's watching this place come together in the same way that he's been coming together. You know, these arterial forces joining down into the cortex of Rick's Road. And it's like, wow. I mean, it's not what my goal is can we build a place that he can actually hide and see Luthen, and what can we see from the, you're doing all the mechanical things. But in the end, you look back and go, wow, this is when it's working well.
Yeah. And I also thought that his past experiences, even within the season of Andor, wound up being kind of echoed in that funeral procession, because I couldn't help but think about the Aldanis and think about their customs and their traditions that they show in the Eye episode. And yet that was like a kind of, that's time has passed those people by, and the Empire has ground those people down. And this is sort of the people of Ferrix saying it's not going to be us. One way or the other, like we're either going to fight for it or we're going to die doing it. But that's not going to be us having like 15 people who are given a permit to celebrate the daughters of Ferrix. And I love that echo back to earlier in the season.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen the erosion of all. I mean, he's seen what? I mean, even go back earlier, Kenari was destroyed. So it's just a series of exiles to him until finally he's exiled into heroism, I guess, or whatever. Yeah, I mean,
Another bit of heroism is obviously Marva's speech, which I wonder whether or not, you had said a couple of times over the course of our conversations throughout the season that you had an idea of where it was going to end. And I was struck by just how powerful that moment was and the image. So I have to imagine that was what you were talking about, that you had this vision of this projection of Marva giving a St. Crispin's Day speech kind of. Can you tell me a little bit about the writing of that? I was curious, actually, on a technical level, was that shot with an actual projection on set, or did you have people hearing that speech in real time as they were on the set there?
Yes. Yeah, we, I don't want to get a lot into rogue stuff. We had a lot of experience from doing the Mads hologram, the Mads Mikkelsen hologram. So there's a lot to learn about doing that. It's also very exciting, and the same people, Moen and TJ Moen, Leo and TJ Falls and all this stuff. There's a way of doing. So yeah, you got to do a guide track, and then you do the other thing, and then you build pieces. And we had Fiona. Fiona gave us, I think she gave us a voice track first, and we played the voice track for all the people. And then, they put up balls and stuff for people to look at and react to, so it's real. But yeah, we were broadcasting her speech live in there. Yeah, I did know I was going to have that. I mean, were you surprised when she popped up out of the thing?
I think I was surprised by the scale of it, because in my experience, like the Leia message in A New Hope is like this little like kind of email that they get on the side. And
right. I see the scale of it. But I mean, I think there were people who thought, you're trying to give the audience confidence. I mean, that's one thing that every writer's trying to do on the first scene of their show, everything. You really want the audience to relax and go, oh, okay, these people know what they're doing. I don't have to worry about the story. They're going to take care of me. So we kind of feel like, we got to 11 and then we didn't show her death. And I think some people were thinking, there was a scheduling conflict, or these guys really dropped the ball. Or I even saw a theory that Marva wasn't dead and someone was trying to sneak her out. I'm like, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But
the Stannis Baratheon.
Yeah, I would only skip that scene if I knew I had I knew I had an ace king in my hole card. I have the hologram, so I can be a little confident there. And these big speeches are they're easier to write than you. There's so many things that are harder than that. I don't think I'm unique in that. I think writers feel that way in some ways. Figuring out how to get Cyril in Ferrix is a lot harder a lot more time consuming than writing Marva's speech, which is sort of a really big packed musket that is ready to go off. And what's the hook? What's the, because you guys like to go so small. I'll tell you what's the hook in there for me. The line when she says, the first time she came, is she's like, what she said, she came, she was a little girl, she held her sister's hand, and she came through she's been seeing these her whole life long. You go, oh my God. So if you've been to all these funerals, what does it mean to you? And so that was the hook in. Once I had that, then I'm good.
Why do you think that the speeches are easier? Is it just because you don't have to worry about the rhythm of people interacting in a room? You can just kind of let Luthen or let Marva cook? Or is it that these are almost like thesis statements for you and you have it already?
I don't know. There's probably some people that I know that would say you're just such a bloviating asshole. We've seen you 2 bottles of wine and 2 vodkas in at dinner, and we know where you go. So there's probably people who would say that. But like, I don't know. When's the first time the president's speech at Armageddon was like? I remember doing that in the hotel. It was like we had to have it for some shit. I can't remember. That was still when I was on Armageddon. And it's like it was literally like, oh, speech for the president. The asteroid's about to hit and you dash it off and you come back an hour later and it's like almost there. So it's like, I don't know. I guess it probably is some big part of vanity and wanting to hit I don't know. It's probably a personal failing that is profitable.
The thing I loved about the Marva speech, and honestly, the same thing I loved about the Nemec manifesto kind of still coming back into play, is even if this never comes up in season 2 and never gets thought about again in all of Star Wars, I love thinking about the idea that these are these kind of iconic totemic, the literature of the rebellion. Like it's like everybody who was there will tell everybody that they know about what was said that day or what they read in Nemec's manifesto. And that almost provides the intellectual backbone for what's about to happen.
Yeah, no, the Nemec one is super valuable. That's a real get. That was really, that to me is an important speech. And I don't, I think it is. I think oppression is really hard. I think it really is hard to hold things together to that. I mean, I think I really believe that thesis. And so that's easy to write because I believe that.
Over the course of these conversations, we've talked about a lot of the collaborators that you had on this show, but we haven't really talked about Nicholas Bertel, who in some ways gets like his hero moment with this funeral procession. And I saw another interview you did for this final episode talking about it's like a second line New Orleans thing meets an IRA funeral. Can you tell me a little bit about like the direction you gave Nicholas about that moment? Because the music is as much a character in this whole sequence as Marva or Cassian or anybody else.
It was really our introduction. We'd spoken and met, and obviously his reputation was so huge, and he's such a, oh my God, and all our phone conversations were great. But right in the very beginning, way before production, I went down to his apartment and was like, okay, I need 3 pieces of diegetic music to go before we start shooting. So we needed the tapping idea, the signaling idea for Ferrix for the warning, and the stuff for the time grappler, and thing for that. And that's music, really, in a way. I didn't want to have that be sound. And then the Aldanis had their thing. I said, we really need these chanting, and there may be more there. But I said, what I really need, and I need 8 minutes of music at the end to cover this funeral. And I want it live, and I want it played by people who are a community orchestra. I think there's always something so heartbreaking about high school bands. And we called them, I said, I want it aspirational, like aspirational horns, and I played him a couple things from the band, from when John Simon, the horns. I loved how the horns sounded on those first 2 band albums.
Yeah. I was just, it's funny you should say that. I was just listening to Rock of Ages the other day, and they've got all the New Orleans ones.
But in the albums, and the band in Big Pink, and those albums are just epic for me. But John Simon, those guys are all playing horns, but they're not playing their actual instruments. They're all great musicians, but they're playing horns. And so we call them aspirational horns. It's people standing on their tiptoes to do it. It's just so heartbreaking. And so that's how we met. And we worked for a couple of weeks on that, and we were so happy with what we did because we also had no vocabulary for what's Star Wars diegetic music and what's not too terrestrial but is soulful and hits with humans. And it was, man, we just had the best time and came out with that. And then got to put that together with Matt Dunkley and Nick's team in London. And actually, Matt Dunkley, who's the concert master of that and the musical director of all that, actually plays Dr. Mal. Like, he's the doctor who comes.
Yeah.
Have him come and be the doctor, because I want like the plumber and the doctor, and you want to see other people that you recognize, doing that. And so we did that first, and it was it was a big win. And then 6 months later, I'm back. Okay, now I need 7 hours of music. It started off very strong. It was really a lot of fun. It was an odd way to begin, but it was a good key to turn.
It's funny. It's like he's like a 5-tool player in this season because he has to do Croatian nightclub music. He has to do Irish funeral music. He's got to do Star Wars, like Imperial classical. It's really amazing.
I know, but Nick is the Swiss Army knife for that. There isn't anything. We just talk music for years and he can go anywhere. He can go from anything to anything. It's great. It's fun.
I haven't really asked you, you mentioned Bourne, and I know that Andy and I are obsessed with Bourne Legacy. What was it like, the experience of especially now watching the series that it's come out on Disney and everything? I know you wanted to direct this. I know the plan was that you were going to be directing a lot of it. And I was curious whether the experience of making this first season at Andor had changed your relationship to directing at all, because obviously like this is being universally praised and people are obsessed with it. And maybe this is a medium where you can exact more control over what's being seen on screen than if you were just writing a script in Hollywood and a director takes it and starts messing around with it. But did this experience change your relationship to directing at all? And if so, how?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, I don't feel the amount of creative control, the amount of decisions, the amount of engagement, the denial of death that great activity brings, all the rest of those things that directing, and also having several hundred people who will listen to you and do what you say, all the control aspects of all those things are satisfied in this showrunner job in a way that, I mean, really almost goes beyond directing. But then the two difficult parts of it are, the hiring directors is really, really tough. There's so many people out there after the same people, and our requirements are really, you got to really fly a 747. We can't take chances really.
Yeah.
A lot of shows can do. So you got to have a certain amount of flight time. Everybody's fighting for those people. And then if you're trying to hire directors, you have to watch everybody's tapes. You end up watching thousands of episodes of stuff of people that turn you down, or you watch them and you don't like. So it's tough that. And then when they come in, what's so cool about it, it's happening literally today. It was happening on Monday. Ari started shooting on Monday and just fully prepped. He's been prepping since June. He's got, 55 days to shoot. He's got a great team. We've been in communication all the way through. Someone asked me a couple of weeks ago, well, who's your writer on set? I go, we do not have a writer on set. How can you not have a writer? I said, by the time we get there, everything is done.
Right.
All my work is done. And then I'm tired. I have so much. I have to get ready for Giannis's block, and I have to get the scripts finalized and upgraded for Alfonso coming and all the rest of the stuff. And I have so many other things to be occupied with. Tired. And I watch his first day. I watched him get his first shot off. I went out to the thing, and it's like, yeah, man, I might be lazier here and just do this. And look what they come and they really bring, they bring themselves, and they bring this extra greed and this ambition, and they're competitive with one another, and they want to do well. And so they bring really, it's good for the show, and it's essential for me. So it's, I whatever I do next, I'm sure I'll direct something. I would like to do it, but I wouldn't want to do something this big.
I have to admit, I let out a real fist pump when I saw Alonso Ruiz Palacios was going to be one of the second season directors, because I loved his narco stuff, but he made that movie
Museo.
And cop movie. I really
you ever
too.
seen Museo? That was great. Museo was fantastic. He's I was just on the phone with him this morning actually. So yeah, they're all different. They all have their own tempo. It's kind of interesting that way. But man, it's really hard. It's really tough out there. It's it's kind of like baseball in a way, expansion teams, you know, there just isn't enough. There isn't enough marquee talent to spread around, right?
Right.
You know, and movies used to be, shows used to be, you know, you'd have a marquee center, and you'd have a great power forward, and you'd have an all-star guard. Those people would take you all the way. And, you know, you'd have that in a movie. Now, any one of those people are so in demand that they all have their own shows.
Yeah. Right.
So gathering franchise players together is really tough.
I would imagine now, have you started with, as production on the second season has started, are people that you're collaborating with now living in a post-Andor world where they're like, oh, well, now I understand because I've seen it. And now I have like a different take on things because I know the rhythms. I know how this is going to sound when Stellan says it. I know how it's going to look when this happens. Has it changed the way the show is being made at all?
I had to give a speech right before we, go. Again, here's why you don't want to be a director. I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go in the dark, out to Long Cross, to the set, and you get out of the car, you're like, oh my God, it's sort of, you know, all your director deja vu to go give a speech. And so what I said, I think, is germane. It's like the second jump out of the plane is supposed to be, I've never jumped out of a plane, but supposedly the second time you jump is much, much more terrifying. The first time you're just going. The second time you're like, oh my God, what could happen? So there is the fear, collective fear. We know what it's going to take to get this done. It's like, and everybody's knows how many things could go wrong. And so the weight of it is in front of you. But man, we did it. We took care of each other. We have an ethic on the show. We have a communication system. We have a really rational, open. Zana Wallenberg, who really is my sister on this thing. I mean, she's just, our relationship is so two sides of the mask, and she does all the heavy lifting on all the production stuff, and I do all the other stuff, and yet we meet in the middle and we always agree. But we have really, I'm very proud of, as much as anything, of the stuff that you don't see, which is that we really have a community of people that really feel like they're valued, and they're all filmmakers, and it's the show that we always wanted to work on. And everybody there has worked on shit shows with assholes and things that were dysfunctional. And we want to do everything we can to make a safe haven so that people will just die for us.
Yeah. Hopefully not literally.
Literally, man, there's part of this that we really have to be shackled in, even if, you know, and part of it's performative. You know, you have to, in the same way directors, and whether they tell you or not, part of being a director, a good director, is putting on a show. It really is. You have to almost get, sometimes you're really faking this other, you know, sometimes you've been faking the other personality so long it becomes who you are. But part of it's performative. You got to really do that. And I don't know. Yeah, all of that.
I wanted to sort of wrap by asking you a little bit about whether you've been intrigued by or frustrated by or gratified by, because in my conversations with friends watching this show and also reading online, like people sort of drawing connections between what's happening in Andor and what's happened either historically in the real world or going on in the real world. And you obviously are pretty candid about your feelings about oppression and everything else. But how important was it to you to have something that was only referencing itself? Because I feel like a couple of times I've seen you mention, like, yes, there are like 100 examples of something like what happened in Ferrix happening in the real world, but for me, it has to make sense for Ferrix. So I was curious about like the desire to keep things within the Star Wars ecosystem versus sort of breaking out into the real world.
Well, I have to stay in the world I've made, so it always has to be there. I can't do anything that's not germane or proper for what's going on, and I also have to. I mean, I have 4 more years of storytelling to deal with, so I have a lot of issues that I don't want to put in the first part of the show that I want to save for later on, and different things like that. But I think that, and I'm not really. It's not a sneaky answer. I've kind of answered this because this question comes up in almost every thoughtful conversation that we have with people about the show. And the press on this has just been fascinating. It's been the most intriguing press I've ever done for anything. And I think I've come around. I didn't have this idea of wanting to do the show, but I think it's really sad in a way. Everybody can look at the things that they want to find in the show and that are modern atrocities or modern injustices or this is a comp to this or that. And what's sad is that it's just the fact that people think that what they're going through now is something new. These are not contemporary issues. The sad story is that, the last 4,000 years of recorded history is just a replicating machine of all these issues over and over and over and over again. And it's sad that it's so easy to go, oh, well, this is us, because we're so vain. We think we're the only people who've lived through, this kind of incarceration or drive-by, traffic stops or slavery or environmental destruction or just complete savage authority. I mean, it's just on repeat. And so I'm saved from having to land on anything contemporary by a legitimate catalog of history that allows me to not answer that question. And it allows me to answer that question in that way and be legit.
Well, I'm curious what it's like then to write scenes set among the oppressors, and specifically Dedra, who I think has been one of the more fascinating characters I've come across in Star Wars full stop, because I think partially because of the performance and like the way in which Denise Gow's eyes look, where they're just like, it seems like she blinks like 3 times a day or something.
Exactly.
But also her true believer nature, and her kind of like, it's that obviously what she sees or what Cyril sees in her and what she may eventually see in Cyril is this idea of like a true devotion to a rule of law that even if it is, appalling to everybody watching and everybody else living under it, that's their New Testament. And those are the commandments. What's it like to write scenes in the ISB among people who are doing the oppressing?
You just put it on and I wrote a movie for Satan's point of view.
That's true.
It was easy.
That's true.
It was like, oh my God.
Look but don't touch is still a very, very powerful line.
All these shit that he says was like, it was so easy to write. I'm like, God, it's way too easy to write this Nietzschean Satan dialogue. It's like, you just have to be, they all have to be, when you're writing them, you gotta put them on and you gotta be with them and you gotta write from their point of view and you get rewarded for doing that over the years. So I guess it's a muscle that you build up, but there isn't anybody I ever wrote that I wasn't on their side when I was writing their scenes.
I mean, that's always the question people ask actors is, do you have to believe that this person is, do you have to identify with this person? Do you have to like this person? Do you have to believe that this person is the hero of this story?
Yeah, but it's like people doing press is like, I have a friend and she's in an interesting situation. I won't get into the whole thing, but there's a lot of aggressive press out there. And there's a lot of people that you don't want to be talking to because it's like, why does anybody pick up the phone and talk to this journalist? Because you're going to get crushed. Why does anybody go in? If you watch the first 48 on TV, why do people confess? Because everybody thinks that if they just speak long enough, and if I can get you to listen hard enough, you will understand what I'm saying. Everybody feels that way, and everybody's wrong. And that's how, that's why people confess to oh God. Yeah. I mean, that's the, if I could just give me another minute and I'll explain it to you. I slaughtered 17 people in cold blood, but you know what?
But yeah.
Yeah. You'd understand if you just listen a little longer. Yeah.
I could listen longer, but I want to give you your day before Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for making this show. Cannot wait to see season 2. And Andy and I have just loved talking about it the whole year.
I can't, and I hope this stays on the tape. I mean, doing press like this over this long haul and with everybody, I mean, it would be an agony if people weren't liking the show, but you guys have just been the trilogy of this thing and watching it lay out and the conversations that we've had. I found out a lot about the show doing these conversations, and it's just been my relationship with the press was really leery at the beginning of the year, and I really it's been a great run on it, and you guys have been a big part of it. So thank you, and thank Andy, and tell him, the fact that he wasn't here at the end is telling. Can't make that last effort, but tell him the closing strong is really where it's at and needs to work on that.
Yeah, I'll mention it. I mean, I'd be lying if I said that's not something I've told him before. So we'll see. It's something we're working on together. Tony, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you much, man. Be well.